You think they're just fine without you. Silent, cold, moving on like nothing happened. Meanwhile, you're up at 2 a.m. wondering if any of it even mattered. But here's the thing. Avoidant exes don't just skip away from breakups unbothered. They go through a very specific psychological cycle. And yes, no contact affects them more than you think. I know it's frustrating to feel like you're the only one hurting, like they just cut you off and kept walking away. But if you've ever wondered whether they actually feel anything, this will give you clarity and a little control back. Now, the critical thing to understand here is this. Most avoidants after a breakup don't feel pain. They feel relief, and that changes everything. Now, if you're doing no contact, but second guessing yourself every day, I made something that can help. The No Contact Survival Kit gives you the roadmap to stay grounded, avoid self-sabotage, and finally stop wondering what they're thinking. You'll find it linked below. Now, before we dive into the stages, just know this. What looks like silence on the outside is often a storm brewing underneath. And it all starts here. Now, everyone moves through these stages a little differently, but most avoidant exes follow a similar emotional arc in the weeks and months after no contact begins. So let's break it all down stage by stage, starting with stage 1, relief. This typically shows up in the first few days or weeks after a breakup. Finally, they can breathe. No pressure, no emotional demands, nothing to manage. In their mind, distance equals peace. And the reason I say that is because for an avoidant, closeness often feels like a threat. Not because they don't care, but because connection can feel overwhelming. For them, it's like being a lifeguard who's never learned how to swim. Every time someone gets close, they panic. But here's the truth, and it's important. What they think is freedom eventually feels like emptiness and pain. Now comes stage 2, rationalization. This stage often kicks in around 2 to 4 weeks. They say things like, it wasn't working anyway, we were just too different. Here they start rewriting the relationship in their mind so they feel justified. But the memories you shared don't just vanish, they still linger in the back of their mind. And that brings us to stage 3, intrusion. Generally between 3 to 6 weeks is when emotional intrusion tends to begin. And this is where you start slipping back in. Not physically, but emotionally. A song, a smell, a random dream. For them, it's like this haunting memory where you can feel this presence. You find this voice still pops into your head now and then. You try not to think about it, but they're just in there somewhere in the back of your mind, even if you don't want them to be. And it's these tiny reminders of you that break their illusion of control. Now it only gets more confusing from here because stage 4 is internal conflict. This stage can stretch from week 4 all the way to week 8 or even beyond, especially if you've stuck to no contact and done it correctly. Stay with me because this is the reality you need to understand. In this stage, they miss this feeling of connection, but they fear being vulnerable, which means they will watch your stories on social media, ask mutual friends how you are, but they still will not reach out to you. Now, we all want to know the exact timeline, so pointing this out is very important because this is the emotional stage where avoidance gets stuck the longest. So you just have to be patient and stick to the no contact rules because next is stage 5, panic or shutdown. This final stage might show up between 6 to 12 weeks, but it could be much longer, depending on their unresolved attachment patterns and emotional triggers. But this is the breaking point, and what that means to you is this. Some will panic and breadcrumb you, a random text, a vague check-in, but, and this is critical to understand, others shut down completely, which means they double down on their avoidance and pretend none of it ever affected them. They bury themselves in work, distractions, or surface level flings, anything to avoid sitting with the emotional discomfort. And what that really means to you is this. They may unfollow you, act indifferent, or suddenly become hyper independent, but it's all a distraction, a way to avoid facing the emotions that they've buried deep down inside while you're in no contact. But the pivotal thing to understand here is this. Both reactions mean the same thing. Whether they're breadcrumbing you or doubling down on trying to ignore you, it's still all about you. You're in their emotional world. That means you're not just a memory. They're actively wrestling with thoughts, feelings, and impulses about you, even if they're doing everything they can to suppress or hide it. And what that really means to you is this. Just because they're not texting doesn't mean they've forgotten. No contact isn't silence, it's a mirror. And if you use it right, it forces them to face the parts of themselves they spent years avoiding. That's why I created the No Contact Survival Kit to help you stay strong, focused, and avoid the mistakes most people make in moments of weakness. Grab it below if you haven't already. So now you know the stages they go through, but how do you actually stay strong when you're in the middle of it? If you want real strategies to stay grounded and avoid sabotaging the progress you've made, watch this next video. 5 no contact mistakes you must avoid if you want to get your ex back. It walks you through exactly what not to do if you want no contact to work.